The distress signal shouldn't have existed. Kael'thor's three-fingered hand hovered over the console, dorsal ridges flattening against his skull in confusion. His species, the Vrynn, had been monitoring this backwater system for 6 rotations now, and the planet, designation Terra 3, third rock from an unremarkable yellow star, had been classified as pre-contact. Primitive. Their most advanced technology was barely capable of breaking their own atmosphere. Yet here it was, a signal. Electromagnetic. Powerful enough to reach the survey vessel's sensors at the edge of the system. And it was repeating. "Commander," he called across the bridge, his translator implant converting his clicks and whistles into standard. "I'm detecting unauthorized transmissions from Terra 3. Commander Zilrek didn't even look up from his tactical display. "Impossible. They don't have the capability." "Nevertheless, sir, I'm reading." Kael'thor's membranes flickered across his eyes as he recalibrated. Multiple sources. Continuous broadcast. Audio and visual components. That got the commander's attention. The older Vryn's skin rippled from deep blue to curious violet. "Visual? Show me." Kael'thor routed the signal to the main view screen and immediately regretted it. The image was chaotic, primitive, two-dimensional, and utterly bewildering. Bipedal creatures with pale skin and strange fabric coverings were laughing. One of them fell off what appeared to be a sitting structure, while others produced rhythmic vocalizations that the translation matrix flagged as amusement response. "What in the void are they doing?" Zilrek muttered. "Unknown, sir. The matrix is having difficulty parsing context. It appears to be some form of theatrical performance, but there's no live audience. It's just being broadcast into space." The commander's skin darkened to dismissive gray. "Waste of bandwidth. Log it and move on. We have 17 more systems to survey this cycle." But Kael'thor couldn't move on. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. 3 cycles later, in the privacy of his quarters, Kael'thor found himself thinking about the strange transmissions again. His official duties were complete, stellar cartography data processed, mineral composition reports filed, biological surveys logged. The Terrans were cataloged as Tier 7 intelligence, pre-spacefaring, tribal conflicts, no contact recommended for minimum 500 rotations. But those broadcasts, his curiosity, a trait the collective considered a flaw in Vrynn psychology, won out. He accessed the archived signals, filtering through the noise. There were hundreds of distinct transmission streams. Some seemed to show conflict, weapons fire, destruction. Others showed mating rituals, or what he assumed were mating rituals. The Terrans seemed remarkably inefficient about it, and still others showed that same puzzling amusement response. He selected one at random. The translation matrix labeled it Friends, the one where, before cutting off. Cultural context, insufficient. For the next 2 hours, Kael'thor watched 6 Terrans interact in what appeared to be communal living quarters. They discussed trivialities, consumption of hot bean extract, romantic entanglements, employment difficulties. The plots were simple, almost absurdly so, by Vrynn standards where efficiency was paramount. Yet he couldn't stop watching. The Terrans were so wasteful. They spent enormous amounts of time on meaningless social interaction. They made decisions based on feelings, a concept the translation matrix struggled with. They argued over nothing. They celebrated the most mundane achievements. They touched each other constantly, casually, as if physical contact wasn't reserved for mating or combat. It was fascinating. Over the following rotations, Kael'thor fell into a pattern. Duty shift, sleep cycle, then hours immersed in Terran broadcasts. He sampled dozens of what they called television shows. Each one revealed new facets of these bizarre creatures. He watched The Office and struggled to understand why Terrans would voluntarily submit to such inefficient work hierarchies, yet found himself, was fond the right word? Of the small one called Kevin, who seemed as confused as Kael'thor felt. He watched Planet Earth and realized the Terrans hadn't even fully explored their own world, yet somehow produced visual documentation of such beauty it made his chromatophores pulse with colors he didn't have names for. He watched Breaking Bad and witnessed a Terran transform from healer to warrior through a series of increasingly questionable decisions. The Vrynn didn't have concepts for moral ambiguity or tragic flaws. Yet somehow this Walter White's journey gripped him with an intensity he'd never experienced during any Vrynn efficiency optimization drama. But it was the Great British Bake Off that broke something in him. Kael'thor sat in his darkened quarters, bioluminescent skin flickering in shades of confusion, watching Terrans compete to create elaborate food items that served no nutritional optimization purpose. They baked for fun, for art, for the sheer joy of creation and the approval of their peers. And when a contestant named Nadia won, when she stood there with water leaking from her eyes, crying, he learned this meant overwhelming emotion, saying she'd proved to herself that she could do it, that she was worthy. Kael'thor felt his own eyes grow hot. The Vrynn didn't cry. They had no biological mechanism for it. Yet he felt something shift in his thorax, a pressure he'd never experienced, watching the stranger from an inferior species achieve something that mattered only because she decided it mattered. Kael'thor, your efficiency ratings have dropped 34% this rotation, Zilrek said during their weekly review. Is there a malfunction? No, Commander. I apologize. I will optimize. But he didn't. He couldn't. Because that night he discovered Avatar, the Last Airbender, and watched a hairless child master elements while grappling with the weight of saving a world he never asked to save. The show was fiction, completely fabricated, yet it spoke truths about honor, friendship, and redemption that no Vrynn philosophical text had ever captured. He started keeping notes, observations about humanity that the official Vrynn xenological surveys had completely missed. They create art with no purpose but beauty. They form bonds with creatures of other species. Dogs? Cats? What are these animals, and why do Terrans love them so fiercely? They laugh when distressed. See, stand-up comedy, a form of theatrical catharsis. They waste resources on celebration and remembrance. They broadcast their stories into the void, expecting nothing in return. That last point haunted him. The Vrynn only communicated what was necessary, efficient, purposeful. But humans sent their hopes and dreams and stupid jokes hurtling into space at light speed, not because anyone was listening, but because they needed to share. Because isolation was a fate worse than silence. Kael'thor had spent his entire life in the collective, surrounded by his species, yet he'd never felt so alone as he did before he started watching their shows. The Terrans, trapped on their little world, somehow understood connection in a way his supposedly advanced species had engineered out of themselves generations ago. The council meeting was called on rotation 847. Kael'thor stood before the three arbiters, his skin deliberately neutral gray despite the fear colors threatening to break through. You have been consuming significant computational resources analyzing Terra. 3 broadcasts, the first arbiter stated. Not a question. This violates efficiency protocols. Yes, arbiter. You were instructed to cease. You did not. No, arbiter. The second arbiter leaned forward. Explain. Kael'thor's skin rippled through a dozen colors before he could stop it. Anxiety, determination, something the Vrynn language didn't have a word for, but humans called hope. Because we're wrong about them, he said. Our classification system is based on technological advancement and resource optimization. By those metrics, the Terrans are primitive. But we measure the wrong things. Continue, the third arbiter said, and Kael'thor thought he detected a hint of curiosity in her chromatic shift. They haven't left their star system yet, but they've imagined 1,000 different futures, utopias and dystopias, and everything between. They broadcast these imaginings, these shows, as cultural artifacts, teaching tools, entertainment, dreams made visible. He pulled up a holographic display, showing clips from dozens of programs. In Star Trek, they imagine a future where they've overcome scarcity and conflict, exploring the cosmos with curiosity rather than conquest. In The Expanse, they show the opposite, carrying their tribalism to the stars. They prepare themselves for every possibility through narrative. Another clip. This is Sesame Street, educational programming for juveniles. They teach mathematics and language, yes, but also empathy, kindness, how to process loss. His voice caught on that last part, remembering an episode about death that had left him staring at his ceiling for hours. They prepare their young not just to survive, but to be good. This is irrelevant to their technological tier. The first arbiter began. Is it? Kael'thor interrupted. A breach of protocol that would have been unthinkable rotations ago. We have faster ships. We have neural linking. We have optimized resource distribution. But when did we last create something beautiful for no reason? When did we last tell stories? When did we last choose connection over efficiency? Silence in the chamber. Kael'thor's skin cycled through defiant orange. I've watched hundreds of hours of their broadcasts, and I've learned something we never put in our xenological surveys. The Terrans are sad. Frequently, they struggle. They fail. They die far too young. Their world is harsh, and their society's imperfect. But they persist. And they don't just persist, they thrive. They create. They love. They laugh at the void. He pulled up one final clip. Doctor Who, the episode where the doctor explains that the universe is big and vast and complicated, but the human heart is more so. They broadcast these stories expecting nothing in return. That's not primitive. That's hope. And his voice broke slightly, we engineered hope out of ourselves 3,000 rotations ago in the name of efficiency. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The ruling took 3 cycles. Kael'thor was reassigned from the survey vessel. He expected punishment detail, resource reclamation in the outer colonies perhaps. Instead, he was given a small monitoring station. Alone, in a stable orbit around Terra 3. Your efficiency ratings are unacceptable for collective work, the third arbiter had told him privately. But your observations about Terran culture, they raise questions. We want you to continue your study. Compile a full xenocultural analysis. We'll revisit the contact timeline in 100 rotations. Then she'd done something unprecedented. Her skin had shifted to warm amber, affection he'd learned from human shows, though Vrynn didn't have an exact equivalent. Between you and me, Kael'thor, I started watching some of their broadcasts too. That Nadia woman, when she won, I think I understand what you meant about feeling something. Now Kael'thor floated in his station, Earth filling his view screen. Beautiful, blue and white and green. Hurricane system swirled. Lights sparkled on the night side. Cities, millions of Terrans living and loving and broadcasting their stories into the dark. He just finished watching The Good Place, a show about ethics and philosophy and whether beings could become better than they were. The final episode had left him contemplating his own journey. A chime. Incoming transmission. Not from a collective. From Earth. Kael'thor's membranes snapped shut in shock. The Terrans didn't have the capability to. The signal resolved. It was a radio transmission, crude, but clever, bounced off their moon to reach his position. And it was directed at him. A human face appeared on his secondary screen. Female. Dark hair. Excited. Wearing what he recognized from broadcasts as glasses and a shirt with a Starfleet insignia. Hello up there, she said in English, which his translator eagerly processed. I'm Dr. Sarah Chun, SETI Institute. We've been tracking an anomalous satellite in stable orbit for the past few months. You're not one of ours, and you're too sophisticated to be space junk, so I took a chance. She grinned. Happiness, excitement, wonder. All the things his species had optimized away. If there's anyone up there, if you can understand this, hi. We're humanity. We've been shouting into space for decades, never quite believing anyone was listening. But maybe you are. Maybe you have been. And if so, God, I hope you like what you've heard. I hope you think we're worth knowing. Kael'thor sat frozen. Protocol said he should report this immediately. Sever contact. The Terrans weren't ready. But he thought of Nadia's tears, of Uncle Iroha's wisdom, of Michael Schur's characters learning to be good, of Fred Rogers telling children they were special just as they were. His three-fingered hand moved to the communications console. "Hello, Dr. Chun," he said in carefully practiced English. "My name is Kael'thor. And yes, we've been listening and watching and learning." He paused, skin shifting through a dozen colors of emotion his species was supposed to have evolved past. "You are very much worth knowing." On the screen, Sarah's eyes went wide. Then she laughed, pure joy, the same sound he'd heard echo through hundreds of hours of broadcasts. The same sound that had changed everything. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Oh my God. Wait until the internet hears about this." And Kael'thor, who had learned about humanity from their television shows, who had discovered what it meant to feel through their stories, who had found connection in the static among the stars, laughed too.